from studios underwritten in part by Sputnik Radio, this is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And very pleased to be Jessica in Matthews, North Carolina. Hey, Jessica, what's on your mind today?
Hey, my name is Jessica Manning. I'm actually a transgender woman from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm living in Matthews currently, right on the border. I was actually calling to discuss the lawsuits going on currently between the Department of Justice and the state of North Carolina, especially with Pat McCrory. I would just want to say, if you support Bernie, the Occupy Wall Street, the Black Lives Matter, you should really be fighting this bill and reaching out to support the LGBT community, because McCrory's really just using this as a smokescreen to really, I guess, incite his campaign supporters for his reelection and to cap the minimum wage.
Yeah, part of it was the preemption preventing Charlotte, the town where you live, Jessica, from providing protections to people like yourself. And part of it was preventing Charlotte from raising their minimum wage or offering worker protections that go beyond those kind of things. And he's using this whole, bathroom thing where it's a non-issue. It's like voter fraud. It's a non-issue. But the Republicans have succeeded in passing voter suppression laws now in 33 states over a non-issue, and now we've got 3 states that are doing this kind of thing, and it's crazy. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. It is the values of this country. It's inconsistent with the values of this country, and I really hope that the president just brings down the wrath of God on North Carolina. He has the ability to cut off their highway funds. And he has the ability to cut off all the funding for the state university there, and is threatening to do so. And I wish he would move along a little faster. I think this is just outrageous.
They actually declined to cut all the funding so far, which is really ridiculous, especially when McCrory is calling to change the actual civil rights laws.
Right.
The civil rights laws. So, that is completely ridiculous. But the fact that the media is just like scandalizing this to be all about the bathroom issues when, trans people have been using the bathrooms forever, obviously.
Sure.
It is just ridiculous because they're ignoring the major issues like the minimum wage or the fact that 15% of trans people, 25 or 23% of multiracial trans people, 35% of Black trans people, and 28% of Latino trans people makes less than $10,000 annually. And the non-discrimination ordinance that was passed in Charlotte, that this whole House bill was, signed to combat, there were no actual job protections for trans people in there whatsoever. That was all about customers and vendors and suppliers and stuff.
Right.
But there was no actual job protections. 26% of trans people are fired just for being trans.
Wow.
And the weird thing is they're making this all about protecting the children and protecting women from sexual predators. But, there was recently, I think today, Reverend Kenneth Worley was arrested for assaulting women. Then there's that Dennis, it was a Hastert who was, a lazy boy in the locker room and everything.
Oh, you're more likely to be solicited in a men's room or a women's room, presumably for that matter. I think by a Republican politician than by a trans person. In fact, I don't have any recollection of any trans person ever being arrested. You would think if it had ever happened, it would be high profile because the Republicans would be pumping it like crazy. Everybody, it would be like Willie Horton. Everybody would know that person's name. But if we need to be worried about anybody in our bathrooms, it's Republican politicians.
Exactly. And the fact that they're doing this to schools are just ridiculous. Because, 44% of LGBT students have been physically attacked while in schools.
Yeah.
So, they're just putting students in more harm. And it's really caused like a skyrocket in the calls to the Trans Lifeline, the suicide prevention line for trans people.
Yep.
They've had over 200 calls every single day. Yeah. And he's not even touching the subject of, the LGBT homelessness in North Carolina, because I know especially in Charlotte, the LGBT homelessness and especially the trans homelessness has really skyrocketed. The average age that a trans kid is kicked out is 13, and 1 in 5 trans people, have to experience homelessness at some point.
Wow.
20 to 40% of homeless youth are actually LGBT. And that's out of 1.6 million. So that's around, 320 to 400,000 trans homeless children, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
What about the violence?
That's a tough one. I have a trans nephew, and thank God my brother and his wife are super, super supportive of him. But, it's the initial reactions. But increasingly, people are discovering that trans people are all around us. They're in our families. They're in our communities. People like yourself, Jessica, and we're all here together. We're all humans in this thing, and to pick basically what Pat McCrory is doing is he's saying, okay, picking on black people, that worked 30, 40 years ago, but, there's enough of them and they've got enough political power now that, we really can't pick on the black people. And picking on gay people, that used to work, but, they've got some. So let's pick on the trans people because, it's like going for it is the most cowardly thing I can imagine. Go for the least of the least, to paraphrase Jesus. And instead of supporting them, trashing them, it's obscene. It is so wrong. Jessica, thank you for calling. Thank you for having all that information at the tip of your fingers verbally.
No problem. Make sure to check out my trans activism blog, the TSpot Daily. It's on Facebook.com/theTSpotUS.
The fight over House Bill 2 has moved from business boycotts and the court of public opinion to federal court. Yesterday, Governor Pat McCrory filed a federal suit against the U.S. Justice Department. The Republican leaders of the General Assembly filed their own suit against the DOJ shortly afterwards. In response, the DOJ filed its own suit against the state. All three seek the same thing, in essence, a federal ruling on whether or not North Carolina's controversial law is a form of discrimination against transgender people. WFAE's Tom Bullock reports.
Yesterday, there was a moment that took Dan Bishop's breath away. It came as he watched U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch announce the federal government was suing North Carolina over House Bill 2.
She said this: it was not so very long ago that states, including North Carolina, had other signs
above restrooms, water fountains, and on public accommodations, keeping people out based on a distinction without a difference.
That distinction was race, the immutable color of someone's skin. In her press conference, Attorney General Lynch said House Bill 2's treatment of LGBT individuals was just as discriminatory as the laws that marked the Jim Crow era South.
That state-sanctioned discrimination never looks good and never works in hindsight.
For Dan Bishop, the Republican state representative from Mecklenburg County who sponsored House Bill 2, there's another immutable characteristic at play in this debate.
Sex is a biological trait. Gender identity is not.
It's now up to federal judges to decide if that is indeed the case, whether sex is defined strictly by biology or if someone's gender is as much mental as physical is at the crux of the federal suits filed yesterday. Each seeks what's known as a declaratory judgment, a ruling on whether or not the bathroom provisions of House Bill 2 violate sections of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, two sections in particular, Title VII, which protects against employment discrimination, and Title IX, which bars discrimination at schools. At a press conference announcing his suit, Governor Pat McCrory said the actions of the U.S. Justice Department, in essence, amounted to a form of bullying and government overreach by the Obama administration.
Our nation is one nation, especially when it comes to fighting discrimination, which I support wholeheartedly. Ultimately, I think it's time for the U.S. Congress to bring clarity to our national anti-discrimination provisions under Title VII and Title IX.
Reaction to the various suits came quickly. Chris Brook is legal director of the North Carolina ACLU.
This claim of federal overreach from Governor McCrory is pretty hard to swallow, given that it comes on the heels of unprecedented state overreach in telling Charlotte what is best for their residents.
But for Dan Bishop, the federal case against House Bill 2 is nothing more than the Obama administration looking to set a new precedent for LGBT rights nationwide before the president leaves office.
They want to roll this newest social revolution out across the United States, and they don't have that much time left to do it.
And for Charlotte City Councilwoman Luana Mayfield, this fight is about more than just a North Carolina law.
Okay, does everyone truly have the ability to the right and the pursuit of happiness in the United States of America, or do we not?
For others, House Bill 2 and the corresponding lawsuits will change nothing. Sitting in her apartment in Charlotte, 26-year-old Jessica Manning freely admits she's breaking North Carolina law.
I use the female's restroom. I still use the restroom that I identify with, the gender I identify with. And I'm not going to stop just because of this bill or any other bill. I mean, what are they going to do, arrest me? Are they going to check me? Are they going to ask for my birth certificate? Who carries their birth certificate?
Jessica was born Josh, and even though her driver's license lists her sex as female, her birth certificate still has the letter M listed under sex. To Jessica and other transgender individuals, the fight over which bathroom they use is more than just a matter of choice or convenience. It is a civil rights issue, one now before federal judges. For WFAE News, I'm Tom Bullock.
You know, Bernie Sanders, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I was one of the people that voted for him in the South Carolina primary. What bugs me about this whole Democratic primary process is the fact that he has won so many states, and he's won some states where Hillary has come out with more delegates, and that just kind of doesn't sit right with me. It's that when she comes out with more delegates when he wins the state, and
that's a big problem with the system and the way that it's put together. I think a lot of people are suddenly seeing that. It's like, wait a minute, how is this possible? That he's winning and she's still doing better than he is. Yeah, I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable about that, and it's something that will have to be addressed at some point. And
I wanted to get your opinion on this. What if? I mean, I think it would be totally over with, and Donald Trump would not have any chance at all, no matter who he picked for vice presidency, if Hillary would pick Sanders to be her running mate.
I think that would clear a lot of things up as far as healing the party, and I'm not quite sure why she's not leading with that as part of the discussion, especially right now, unless she's not interested in doing it, which makes me a little nervous. Like the establishment party that's trying to hold it together while the Republicans fall apart, that makes me nervous because, as Jake Quinn said in the first hour, we have an opportunity to really shake things up, to redefine the way we do things in this entire country this year in this election. But the Democrats seem more interested in Democratic domination if and when the Republicans fall apart, as opposed to doing what's best for the nation moving forward. And that bothers me a bit.
Well, what bothers me is that I'm afraid she might pick a moderate Democrat to be her running mate. And that will just be bad, I think. Oh, yeah. Well, and she's looking, here's my thing. I believe she is looking currently at that Julian Castro, who is I think he's like a secretary of transportation or something in this country. His brother, Juan Castro, is the mayor of San Antonio, Texas. I believe they're twin brothers. They're Latino. They're young. And honestly, I think that's the odds-on favorite because that's a demographic they need to plug, as well as up-and-coming young superstar of the party, not unlike Barack Obama in 2004. That's what I think it's going to be. I really do. Well, thanks. I listen to you guys every day. I appreciate you, man. And I really appreciate having a progressive station around, and keep up the good work. Thank you, Greg. Always good to hear from you, buddy. Call back again soon. I'm so glad to hear back from him. It's great. Yeah, it's fantastic. Let's go line one. Let's take Jessica. She's also calling from South Carolina. Jessica, how you doing? Hey, I'm actually from Charlotte, North Carolina. Oh, from Charlotte. Okay, so you're okay. How are you doing? I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself? Not too bad. I was actually calling because I was featured nationally all day long on the Morning Edition show and NPR shows about the
issues going on between the Department of Justice and the state of North Carolina currently with a lawsuit.
Oh yeah, that's we've rolled our state back to pre-civil rights era in the span of 24 hours, and we're the laughing stock of the nation at this point, I think.
Exactly. But the thing that really gets me is the fact that, even though we're all discussing this bill and how there's this lawsuit going on, there's a lot of other issues that are just being completely swept under the rug. And these are bigger issues. I think that it's really getting scandalized about the bathroom issue when, there's other issues worked into that bill, such as...
much worse, by the way. The whole bathroom thing is just kind of the window store dressing of what's going on. What's really down further in that bill is far more destructive, but everybody's only paying attention to the bathrooms.
Exactly. And I mean, there's the whole minimum wage issue that people are just completely forgetting about that's in that bill.
And discrimination and there's also discrimination for any reason. Anybody who's being discriminated against doesn't have a path of recourse because of this bill.
Exactly. And I mean, what about any of the other issues such as workplace discrimination for trans people? I mean, 35% of all black trans people in America earn less than $10,000 annually.
Okay.
So it's really ridiculous that we're focusing on these little issues like the bathroom and stuff whenever there's stuff that's really going on like that. This bill really has a body count at this point. The Trans Lifeline has doubled as far as the calls that they've gotten on a daily basis. They're getting, 200 plus calls a day over this. I mean, this is really taking an effect on trans kids. And what about the other kids as far as the education? Because, I mean, this is going to strip $4.3 billion, I think, dollars in federal funding for education here in North Carolina.
Yeah, it's the damage from this is so catastrophic to everybody but the elite. And it's abusive what they're doing by making these choices to the people who are looking to them to actually lead, as opposed to whatever this is that they're trying to do.
Exactly. I mean, it's a blatant discriminatory law, and I mean, it really sucks that we're putting all this effort into something as simple as a bathroom, when there are 1 in every 5 trans people who have experienced homelessness during their lives. I mean, there's issues like 20 to 40% of all of the 1.6 million homeless people are LGBT, and LGBT youth at that. So, I mean, there's so many other issues that we need to be focusing on, and we're distracted by this, and then it's just complete bigots constantly over and over and over bashing everyone, and just it's getting out of control, really.
It really is. I've said before, because we've been on this ever since this thing came about, and we looked at what was actually in the bill, how they're using this to whip up their base who are paranoid and ignorant and frightened by anything that's different than what what their norm is.
Here to set you free, I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back. Only true democracy in talk radio of, for, and by you, the people. In this hour, just you, just me, your opinions, your comments, your questions, your concerns. And, there are a lot of concerns about bathrooms, and specifically in the state of North Carolina. But it goes deeper than this. The Justice Department yesterday sued the state in North Carolina over that state's new bathroom law after the governor refused to back down. Well, our Attorney General got into the fray, obviously, as the head of the Justice Department, as the AG, and this is what she had to say. Here is our Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, denouncing the bathroom bill in the state of North Carolina.
About a great deal more than bathrooms. This is about the dignity and the respect that we accord our fellow citizens and the laws that we as a people and as a country have enacted to protect them, indeed to protect all of us. And it's about the founding ideals that have led this country haltingly but inexorably in the direction of fairness, inclusion, and equality for all Americans. This is not the first time that we have seen discriminatory responses to historic moments of progress for our nation. We saw it in the Jim Crow laws that followed the Emancipation Proclamation. We saw it in the fierce and widespread resistance to Brown v. Board of Education, and we saw it in the proliferation of state bans on same-sex unions that were intended to stifle any hope that gay and lesbian Americans might one day be afforded the right to marry. And that right, of course, is now recognized as a guarantee embedded in our Constitution. And in the wake of that historic triumph, we have seen bill after bill in state after state taking aim at the LGBT community. Now, some of these responses reflect a recognizably human fear of the unknown and a discomfort with the uncertainty of change. But this is not a time to act out of fear. This is a time to summon our national virtues of inclusivity, of diversity, of compassion and open-mindedness. And what we must not do, what we must never do, is turn on our neighbors, our family members, our fellow Americans for something that they cannot control and deny what makes them human. And this is why none of us can stand by when a state enters the business of legislating identity and insists that a person pretend to be something or someone that they are not, or invents a problem that does not exist as a pretext for discrimination and harassment.
Now, I told you the governor refused to back down. You just heard Attorney General Loretta Lynch talking about the law requiring transgender people to use public restrooms corresponding to the gender on their birth certificate amounts to state-sponsored discrimination. By the way, this one will go all the way to the Supreme Court. So what does the guy who doesn't want to and isn't going to back down have to say? Here's Governor Pat McCrory defending the bathroom law in his state of North Carolina. Take two.
We asked on Friday the Department of Justice for additional time. In fact, we asked for an additional 2 weeks. But they refused unless I made a statement where I would publicly agree with their interpretation of federal law. And if I did, they would give me 1 additional week to respond. I could not agree to that because I do not agree with their interpretation of federal law. That is why this morning I have asked a federal court to clarify what the law actually is. Now, I anticipate our own legislature, other private sector entities from throughout the United States, and possibly other states to join us in seeking this clarification. Because this is not just a North Carolina issue. This is now a national issue, and an issue which imposes new law on every private sector employer throughout the United States of America with over 15 employees. We believe a court, rather than a federal agency, should tell our state, our nation, and employers across the country what the law requires.
Well, you've heard from the Attorney General suing that state and then the governor of that state. And we're going to hear from you, 888-6-LESLIE, 888-653-7543. But let's talk more about that. There are billions of dollars in federal aid for the state of North Carolina. A potentially landmark decision regarding the reach of our own civil rights laws are at stake in this dispute. Last week, the Department of Justice said the law amounts to illegal sex discrimination, and you heard just now the audio from Attorney General Loretta Lynch. And that gave, up until yesterday, the governor who you just heard from, a Republican in the state of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, until yesterday, to say he would refuse to enforce it, and he whined about, as you just heard, only having 3 days to respond. Now, when the deadline arrived, a very defiant Governor McCrory instead sued the federal government, arguing that the state law is a common-sense privacy policy, and that the DOJ's position is baseless and blatant overreach. Managed to respond. Later in the day, the GOP leaders of North Carolina's legislature said they had sued the Department of Justice, too. That may not be good in November, being copycats. Now, the governor is up for re-election in November, and he has accused the Obama administration of unilaterally rewriting federal civil rights law to protect transgender people's access to bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers, not just in North Carolina, but nationwide. He said, quote, "This is not a North Carolina issue. It is now a national issue. And by the way, isn't that convenient in an election campaign year?" And you heard the Attorney General. Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who is from North Carolina, by the way, said this is about the dignity and the respect that we accord our fellow citizens. It's about the founding ideals that have led this country haltingly but inexorably in the direction of fairness, exclusion, and equality for all Americans. Department of Justice, we told you, they struck back. They sued the state, so it's like you sue me, I'll sue you. They sought a court order declaring the law discriminatory and unenforceable, and the AG also said the department retains the option of curtailing federal funding to the state over the issue. It has not done that yet, by the way, and many people find that interesting. Defenders of the law have argued that it's needed to safeguard people's privacy and protect them from being molested in bathrooms, and there was no ability to cite any instances of such molestation. The governor was on Fox News Sunday. He could not give any examples. He said that there were instances of molestation. Couldn't cite one. The Attorney General said supporters of the law harassment. Now, you've already heard that there is money that will be lost to the state of North Carolina, not necessarily even from the federal government, but in the private sector. Stars like Bruce Springsteen, Pearl Jam, they've canceled shows in North Carolina over this law. PayPal abandoned a planned 400-employee operation center. Deutsche Bank froze expansion plans. And nearly 200 corporate leaders from across the nation have urged the measure's repeal, arguing it's bad for business. It's not good for business, obviously. The law was passed in reaction to an ordinance in Charlotte that allowed transgender people to use the bathroom that corresponds to their gender identity. But it also excludes lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people from state anti-discrimination protection, and it bars local governments from adopting their own anti-bias measures. Now, North Carolina's Attorney General, who is a Democrat, Roy Cooper, and he's running against McCrory for governor, he's refused to defend the law. He's called for its repeal, and yesterday he warned in a video that Governor McCrory, quote, is pouring gas on the fire that he lit when he signed the measure, and he's having a fine old time with it. Both of them are. Before I ask you some questions, I don't live in North Carolina. Never have, and I visited there. Beautiful state, a lot of beautiful people. But North Carolina has a lot of problems. It has money problems, teen pregnancy problems, high school dropout rate problems, high unemployment problems, crime problems, problems that many states in our nation have. Who's using what bathroom is not and should not be one of them, in my opinion. Now, some people say, well, Leslie, you don't live there. Well, let me speak to a different part of this issue. There are people out there who are concerned that men will dress as women and will harm women, as if that hasn't already occurred to a predator. And there are also those that are concerned about their children. Well, I am a woman. I do use women's bathroom, and I am the mother of a 8-year-old girl and soon to be a 9-year-old boy, so I can speak to that area of these areas of this issue. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say the first time I ever saw a man dressed as a woman, I didn't look once, twice, maybe 3 times, like most of you, admit it, and say to yourself, what is that? Or, isn't that a guy wearing a dress? And was I completely comfortable with it at first? No. But then when we learn that sometimes there are chromosomal abnormalities and that these people have deep-seated identity issues and identify as a different gender than they were born, when you start to be educated and informed and knowledgeable on the area and meet some of these individuals and hear about their struggle, it puts that, what is that, aside. Now, the issue of restrooms. I'm going to be very frank, and this is not the most lovely thing to hear. Kids shouldn't be listening, okay? I live in Los Angeles, California. I live in a nice area of Los Angeles, California. I work very hard, and throughout my life, even when I didn't make decent money, not that I make tons of money, but I certainly make more than I did 20 years ago, I've always used a lot of my paycheck to pay for where I live. Some people have nice cars, some people have nice jewelry, some people have nice clothes. I've always wanted to live in a safe neighborhood because I got married later in life and I lived throughout the country and I'd moved to cities and I didn't know anybody. And I felt safer that way, and my family felt safer about me being so far away. I've taken my kids to a park where I've walked into the restroom and a woman was performing oral sex on a man. In broad daylight, in a nice area of Los Angeles. The other day I was at Target, and there was a woman completely naked in Target, showering her body. She was homeless, she was strung out on drugs. It was not something pretty to see. I've seen people defecate outside the bathroom door at the supermarket. And we had to be escorted out of our own bank because somebody had overdosed in the bathroom at the bank. None of these people were trying to molest my children. And these people did more harm to my children. And what my children saw, the ugly side of our society, for some homeless, for some drugs, and for some just no common decency. A man dressed up like a woman is the least of my concern. The Justice Department sued North Carolina over the state's anti-LGBT law. They call the bill state-sponsored discrimination. Is it, in your opinion, state-sponsored discrimination, this law? 8886-LESLIE, 888-653-7543. Attorney General Loretta Lynch compared HB 2 to America's Jim Crow laws, where people of color were forced to use different bathrooms and drinking fountains than white people. Is this a fair comparison? 8886-LESLIE. You're African American. Is it a fair comparison? 8886-LESLIE. Does the law need to be overturned? 8886-LESLIE. Billions of dollars in federal aid for North Carolina are at stake in this dispute with the DOJ. Would overturning HB 2 be for the betterment of even of North Carolina? And especially we've heard about the private sector, Bruce Springsteen, Pearl Jam, Deutsche Bank, PayPal, 8886-LESLIE, 888-653-7543. Governor McCrory's up for re-election November 2016. Will HB 2 cost him his seat? And if so, it is only a matter of time before this law is repealed, and perhaps Governor McCrory will be on the unemployment line. 8886-LESLIE, 888-653-7543. Defenders of the HB 2 law have argued that it's needed to safeguard people's privacy and protect them from being molested in bathrooms. Yet there is not anyone, there's no one, Governor McCrory or anybody else, has been able to cite a single instance of this ever happening. Is this just blatant hatred and discrimination on his part, 8886-LESLIE? And is this ignorance yet again? Right? And people, right? You know, you can't catch this, folks. 8886-LESLIE, 888-653-7543. And McCrory calls the DOJ's lawsuit a baseless, and blatant overreach. Isn't that a better description of HB 2 than the lawsuit that the DOJ has put toward the state of North Carolina? Has filed. 8886-LESLIE, 888-653-7543. Call me, tweet me, follow me on Twitter at Leslie Marshall, talking about this right after the commercial break. Don't go away. The state of North Carolina suing the federal government. The federal government says we're going to sue you back. Department of Justice does just that and says that this HB 2, the bathroom bill as they're calling it, is discriminatory. It's bigoted. And our Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who's an African-American woman and who's from the state of North Carolina, likens it to Jim Crow laws. What do you say? 888-6-LESLIE, 888-653-7543. Let's get to the calls, and we started out with Jessica in Charlotte, North Carolina, on line 1, listening to Progressive Voices. Hi, Jessica. How you doing? Thank you for joining us. You're in the state of North Carolina. Before you give us your opinion, is this like a topic of conversation every day, and do you feel the state, at least where you are in Charlotte, is very divided over this?
It's definitely a conversation that is going on every day right now, and Charlotte is really divided over this. I was actually there during the non-discrimination ordinance vote, whenever, the thing that actually started all of this. And during that vote, there was so much hate and bigotry just everywhere as far as the people that were up there kind of going supporting the non-discrimination ordinance to not be passed. They were pushing for it to not go through with the city council, and, they lost, but they were crazy. There was even one guy who declared himself a king and said that because we can declare our genders legally and must be treated as so, then he is going to declare himself a king legally, and we must treat him as so. He had on like a crown and a Renaissance outfit and everything. So the people are really ridiculous as far as this goes. The division is very harsh.
We're going to be taking a break in a minute, but I want you to be thinking about this. Is this split politically, and how does that play religiously? Because there's a lot of religious folks in North Carolina, even Democrats, who are religious. And, we've seen this happen before. People are like, well, I'm Democrat, so I have a hard time with gay marriage, as an example. We'll be back with our caller and with you right after this. Hey there, I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back. We are talking with Jessica in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're talking about something going on in that state. There's a lawsuit in that state toward the federal government and one back from the federal government to the state of North Carolina. There's a governor there up for re-election, a Republican, who doesn't, care and wants HB2. Our Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, an African-American woman from North Carolina, and I say that because I think an African-American woman can speak to Jim Crow laws much better than a white chick can. And she said that's what this likens to. We're talking with Jessica in Charlotte, North Carolina on line 1, listening to Progressive Voices. And Jessica said they're very divided there in Charlotte, where she lives in North Carolina, over this. It's a topic of conversation every day. Jessica, when we add the element of religion, is that what's going on here, or is it more political?
I don't really think it's more religion. I think it's more political. I think that McCrory is really using this as like a wedge issue for his November election to kind of whip up his voters. I mean, it's a very cynical manipulation of his own supporters, and I mean, it's using their fear and ignorance against them. And I mean, yeah, there are some people who are religious and use that as their reasoning, but at the same time, it's only the ignorant ones. It's only the people who, just are boastfully ignorant. And he's doing that right now, and he's whipping him up, but at the same time, he kind of has to. I mean, he has no charisma. He's got nothing to really make him win the vote. But I mean, as far as he gets in the office, he doesn't really do anything. He has all this talk, but whenever he's in office, he doesn't really do anything. I mean, he's like the Hillary Clinton of North Carolina.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. Anything else before we let you go there in Charlotte, North Carolina?
Just to let you know, I have been on a bunch of different shows that are going nationally right now, between NPR and, just a bunch of different independent shows and national shows. But make sure to check me out on Facebook for facebook.com/theTSpotUS. It's my social activism blog for trans issues. Not only that, but make sure to keep your eye out for a nonprofit that we're, starting up to provide housing to homeless trans and at-risk trans youth, and really, help them get scholarships for school and stuff.
Ring of Fire, Saturdays at 4 on 880 The Revolution, Asheville's Progressive.
How are things going for you there?
They're going pretty good right now. Of course, since the Justice Department is now filing that lawsuit, unfortunately, that is going to take a while. Mm-hmm. And it's just really ridiculous that this whole issue is being scandalized to be a bathroom issue when really this whole thing was nothing more than a wedge issue to get Pat McCrory another election.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
Mm-hmm,
They're playing. This is the exact same kind of social issue, wedge issue, divisive game playing that they have been playing for 35 years.
Exactly. And
you're now the target, though, unfortunately. First it was abortions, gays, now you.
Exactly. And I mean, just because they're doing this wedge issue, they're scandalizing it to be all about the bathrooms, when all that's really doing is just, throwing a smokescreen over the real issues, like, the minimum wage that's in the bill, which is completely ridiculous. The fact that the Charlotte LGBT homeless and for the homeless youth has really just exploded lately between Charlotte and the rest of North Carolina. The fact that there are no legal protections for trans or LGBT people in the workplace. The fact that 26% of people get fired just for being trans, and 35% of black trans people make under $10,000 a year.
I'm not surprised, sadly.
I mean, it is ridiculous, and the rate of violence against trans people, especially trans people of color,
off the charts, right?
Off the charts. And since they've had this bill, the Trans Lifeline, the suicide prevention hotline that has been dedicated to trans people, has exploded.
Jessica, can you hang on with me for 1 second? Jessica, I'll take a quick break. Hang on with me. We'll come right back. I want to hear some more of this, and we got more to do where justice is served. Hey, Jessica, thank you so much for holding over with me in North Carolina. As a trans person, I gather that this law that the legislature passed, the governor signed, has to some degree at least, and please, I want to be wrong, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but my fear is that it creates an atmosphere that tells people that are hostile to transgender people it's okay to attack them, pick on them, yell at them, be abusive, physically harm them, because the state of North Carolina is declaring official hostility to transgender people. I mean, is that happening? I'm afraid it is. Please tell me I'm wrong.
It is. It's a green light to discrimination. And not only that, one of the local school counties here in Rowan County School District has actually authorized for the students to bring pepper spray to school with them in case there are any trans people in the bathroom that are, I guess, bothering them just by being in the bathroom and existing. And then on top of that, I mean, it's agreeing to any business that wants to discriminate against us. I mean, the non-discrimination ordinance that was passed by Charlotte in the first place that started this whole thing, I mean, there were no, legal job protections in that bill. All that bill really was for is just so that we could go into a place of business that we spend our money at and not be denied service, and that we would be able to, or that we have to be able to use the bathroom that correlates with our gender identity. That's all that did. And because of that, it started this whole thing. And now it is completely green-lighting discrimination.
And many people believe that many people believe wrongly, the Republicans believe that there's some kind of license or immunity to commit rape in bathrooms. I don't understand the hysteria on the Republican side. But Jessica, I'm very, very sorry that they have used you as a political cudgel to bang their way to electoral victory. I will echo what the Attorney General said. I see you. I know you are there, and I will do everything that I can to protect you, because you are under attack, and you are under attack falsely and for doing nothing wrong. Jessica, thank you for calling. And the state of North Carolina is learning a very valuable lesson now, and it'll take more time. That lesson is America has changed now. And maybe you guys should get with the program